Welcome back. Good to see you, Richard. Happy 2023.
And that, again, yes, 2023. Here we go, launched into another year.
Yes.
Yep.
Here we go again.
The holiday season seems so far away, doesn't it?
It does. It seems like it was a month ago.
Long ago. It's only been a week, but schools are back in session.
Yep.
Everybody's settling into the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. And today we're going to talk about an issue that's not necessarily related to the new year, but it's something that we see here in the office, in our practice quite often. And it's an issue related to a very common diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And, one of the things that we've noticed is that over the last couple of decades, really, there has been a significant increase in the number of patients who feel like and come to the office with questions regarding ADHD, especially in adults.
We're talking about adult ADHD.
Adult onset ADHD. Right. And I think we could expand it a little bit to include adult and sort of late adolescent ADHD, because we get a lot of juniors and seniors in high school who come in and are looking for a first-time diagnosis of ADHD. And that it's just been a significant increase in the past couple of decades.
Right. Yeah. So between, there are some studies that the federal government, National Institutes of Health, have undertaken. And it says between 1994 and 2009, there was a six-fold increase in adult patients who were prescribed stimulants. So diagnosis made and stimulants prescribed. And among non-psychiatrists, psychologists who don't prescribe, there's been an eightfold increase. So for some reason, there's this enormous increase in the number of adults who are being diagnosed with ADHD. Mm-hmm. And it's not only in the United States. There was also a study in London that found that 49% of the adults believe that their attention span is shorter than it used to be, and that this notion of deep thinking, the ability to focus and concentrate, is becoming a thing of the past. So not just in this country, so in other countries and other industrialized countries, there's been this increase that there seems to be something wrong with my ability to focus and attend.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So the important question that this raises, or a question embedded in these statistics, is are the rates really increasing? Mm-hmm. Which I'm not sure they really are, but are they increasing, or is modern life, especially technology, is it stealing our attention? Is it reducing our capacity to attend? Okay. Right. Certainly that's the case with parents and teachers who are, I think the right word is probably convinced, mm-hmm. that students are less and less able to focus and concentrate on schoolwork and homework, right, with the advent of electronic technology, that parents and teachers are seeing a decrease in students' ability to focus and attend to schoolwork and homework.
Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the biggest complaints or biggest things that we hear people talk about is, well, it's because they're on their device all the time. It's because they, kids just can't pay attention like they could anymore. Right. They used to be able to. And that something in life today is stealing that from them, stealing that ability from them to be able to focus and attend and concentrate in the way that they need to. And so, it does make sense that they have this concern, but we're going to talk about it slightly differently, because I think that it is important to consider, we can't find causality with anything, right? We can't say, well, technology causes ADHD, just like we can't say sugar causes ADHD. When that was the argument back, 4 or 5 decades ago, I guess. Mm-hmm. but it's important that we look at this.
That's right. What is the relationship between technology and diminished attention, decreased attention span? What is that relationship? Is technology to blame?
Right.
Or, so is that the reason? Is it because of technology that the rates of adult ADHD are going up? Is the technology to blame? And as it turns out, there is a woman who's written a book, published. It's got a 2023 publishing date, so it's a recent publication. Her name is Gloria Mark, and she's written a book called Attention Span: Finding Focus for a Fulfilling Life. And I haven't read the book yet, but there was a great explanation of the book in The Guardian publication from the United Kingdom. Now, Gloria Mark works in the US. She teaches at the University of California. She has been researching human-computer interaction and technology's effects on our day-to-day lives since the 1990s. So actually since most of us started using personal computers. Right. And so she has been studying this computer-human interface and the effects that technology has on human functions. And we posted a website that you can go to and find the article. Yeah. But this podcast is really a discussion of the major points that she makes in her book. Okay? Right. And I think it speaks to, and it really does directly address this issue of, is the technology causing us to lose our capacity to attend, to focus and attend?
Right. And I think it's important to start out from the beginning that with ADHD, there are clear diagnostic criteria for what constitutes ADHD. And part of that is that there has to be impairment and identified symptoms and impairment prior to the age of 12.
Right.
So it doesn't matter how old you are or what you're experiencing. If you didn't have those symptoms and characteristics prior to the age of 12, then it's not ADHD. And, right. And I think that we have to remember that, because people have a hard time recognizing that. And so we throw the diagnosis out there a little bit too readily when a patient comes in. And, I know that I always ask, what was it like in elementary school and middle school? And, invariably they'll say it was okay, it was fine. Oh no, I did just fine then. It wasn't until more recently that that happened. And okay, well, then it's not necessarily ADHD, but
that's right.
So there's that point. And then the other point is that there's sort of two camps when it comes to this, right? There is the camp that says the technology is stealing our ability to focus. That technology is making it to where we lose our ability to concentrate and sustain attention. Mm-hmm. And there's another camp that says, well, ADHD aside, you can't be distracted from something unless you want to be.
Right.
And I, this writer, Mark, she doesn't think either of those things are correct.
Right. That's right. Most people think of it in that way. They have this binary, this bipolar way of looking at it. Either that, yes, technology is stealing it. On the other hand, people say, hey, wait a minute, it's not the technology. You're the one who's using the technology and you're going down these rabbit holes and you're the one who's distracted by it. You could choose not to be distracted.
Right.
But you're choosing to be, and we're going to talk about that. And it's really a fascinating point that her research has discovered when it comes to you want to be distracted, because many people would disagree with that and say, no, I don't want to be. I get drawn into it. I get sucked into this technology and it happens so fast that I have to keep up. But she makes an interesting point. We're going to discuss those. We're going to focus on four major points that she makes in her book. And one of them is that idea that you're choosing to be distracted. But she says, no, it's not an either or. It's neither the technology or is it that you want to be. There's something else that we need to consider.
Right. So the first point she makes is that our digital lives have evolved so fast.
Right.
And we're still trying to catch up, really, to catch up with the safeguards to protect ourselves from the technology that we've developed.
Right. We now, in less than a 20-year span, When you think of computers,
Right.
how quickly the internet has changed. It would be like the Wright brothers flew their plane, and then 10 years later, we were putting people on the moon. And you can take any technology, TV, where TV was this little tiny box on a cabinet filled with tubes, and suddenly we're doing Netflix. Like 10 years later, we're doing Netflix. No technology has evolved so quickly as the internet.
Well, and I was thinking about I was thinking about this the other day, that when I was in graduate school, the year 2000 doesn't seem like that long ago.
Right.
I mean, it was 23 years ago, but it doesn't seem like that long ago. But when I was in graduate school, when I first started, I had a filing cabinet that was full of articles for my dissertation and thesis that I was collecting, because even in 2000, we had to go to the library and make copies from journal articles, you actually get the physical journal and make copies. Now, we could search for it through databases online and everything, but most articles weren't available as PDFs, or you couldn't save them on your computer because it just wasn't available. You still had to go to the physical library and make copies. And that was just in 2000.
Right.
Now, I haven't printed out an article in years, unless I wanted to, but there's no filing cabinets. There's none of that anymore, because we don't need that.
Yeah, everything's available online.
Right.
And so we have this rapidly developing technology, but we're still learning how to manage it.
Right.
Okay? And our brains haven't had time to adjust. Our brains are prehistoric.
Right.
Okay? They're used to doing things slowly and methodically and gradually. We have the brain of a hunter and gatherer. Okay. You keep in mind, it took 10,000 years. Think of this. It took 10,000 years to go from speech to reading.
Right.
If we want to talk about this technology, okay, 10,000 years, that's how our brain evolves. It evolves slowly over time. Suddenly, there's been this almost, by comparison, this almost instantaneous leap in technology. I mean, it's happened. So it didn't take 10,000 years to get from that garage in California where the Macintosh was created to what we have today. That wasn't 10,000 years. That was a couple of decades. Okay.
Right.
And our brains haven't had time to adjust. And she did a study. This Gloria Mark did a study.
It's interesting.
Right. And you go back to 2000, if you say it wasn't that long ago. Okay. Right. In 2004, using a stopwatch, that's all we had. That was the technology. She found that computer workers shifted their attention every 3 minutes. So they would work on something, in 3 minutes later they'd change. 3 minutes later they'd change. That was in 2004. 2012, it was 74 seconds. So it went from 3 minutes, 180 seconds, to 74 seconds.
Less than half the amount of time.
Right. And then by 2021, it was 47 seconds. Our attention shifted every 47 seconds, regardless of what job you were doing or regardless of what your age was. Attention shifted every 47 seconds. And do you ever watch Turner Classic Movies? No, of course not. No. If you watch a Turner Classic movie from the 20s or 30s or even the 40s, cameras were too big to move then, and so they were stationary. And so the image on the screen stays on the screen for a very long period of time. It would shift to another camera, but it would stay on the screen for a long. If you want to check this yourself, watch a Turner Classic movie from the 30s, count how many seconds the image stays on the screen, then go to a recently broadcast TV program and count how many seconds the image stays on the screen. So even in TV, it's shifting within seconds, not within minutes. You can measure Turner Classic Movies in minutes.
Right.
Today, it's in seconds that the screen keeps changing. So our attention span, our shortening attention span is shaping the media, and the media in turn is shaping our attention span. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Today's students don't want to plod through a curriculum, a skill at a time.
Right.
That's how we went to school. That's not how kids go to school today. Kids go to school today by snatching bits and pieces of information as they need it when they want it.
Yeah.
They're not interested in a scope and sequence. Learning has become simultaneous. You
Right.
learn a bunch of stuff that you want to learn and you ignore the rest of it. That's
Right.
not how we learned. You went in every day and you learned that material each day. That's
Right.
not how kids learn today.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's how they learn through YouTube and everything else. Is just you go in and learn the skill that you want. You don't necessarily learn the theory and everything behind it,
Right?
In the way that they want you to do in school. But
it takes way too long.
Absolutely. Now, the second point that she makes is that we are not equally susceptible.
Right.
She doesn't believe that everyone has the same susceptibility to losing our attention,
right.
In the way that some might suggest.
Right. There are studies, she's done studies where she said if a person scores high on urgency or impatience, I want to get on type A, or neuroticism, the shorter their attention span. So not everybody is equally affected by this. And we tell parents all the time, some kids can handle this technology. Some don't have any problem with it. Some adults can handle the technology. Many can't, okay? The problem that the internet poses is that our brains work by pursuing semantic networks. In other words, if I go in and say tree, then my brain goes to oak tree, maple tree, elm tree, leaves, roots, bark. And there's this semantic web that I create. That's what our brains do. And that's exactly what the internet does. It mirrors how our brain works. The other thing about humans is we are always curious. By nature, we're curious. We're always moving forward. When we fall forward, but we're always looking forward. So we're curious by nature. Well, that's what a rabbit hole is, isn't it? I mean, it's perfectly suited to satisfy our curiosity. And we say, wow, I got into this, went down a rabbit hole, and 4 hours later, I was still fooling around on the internet. That's right, because it satisfies a basic part of who we are, a basic part of our species. Okay.
Right. It's just what we want to do. It's just
what we want to do. That's right.
Right.
And then finally, stress and exhaustion diminish our self-control. So if we're stressed, if we're exhausted, we tend to lose our ability to attend and focus. And so the more time we pursue these things at a very high level, especially when we get into focus or flow, that our ability to attend will diminish, but also our ability to control what we're doing will diminish, because our default setting is pursue, answer those questions, see what's next.
Right. Yeah. So basically, not being equally susceptible, there are temperamental and personality traits that each of us have that may make us more or less susceptible to some of this. Right. But again, in the end, it's important to remember that our brains are made in such a way that they want to explore. They want novelty. They want to delve deeper. And so when we have those rabbit holes, and that's why they call it clickbait and those kinds of things, because you're looking at something and then all of a sudden here's a little nugget of information over here. It's like, oh, well, how is that related? And you just start following those rabbit holes. And I think your point about flow is important, because that is sort of what happens, is you just get into this this series of clicks that take you to different places and you lose track of time, because
imagine if you're into it. Right. Imagine if you're 15 years old and you're on TikTok or YouTube, and you're or any one of these places, and you're saying, oh, that's cool, that's neat, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go, oh, this looks good, this looks good. No, it's time to do your algebra. Okay. The difference, one is so completely in sync with how your brain works, and the other is the complete opposite, because now you have to stop what is natural and enjoyable and shift to what is unnatural and quite literally very dull and boring. And your brain starts to switch off. Okay. So yeah, there's a battle between those things. The other point she makes, and I was fascinated by this and the next one, points 3 and 4.
Yeah.
We have become accustomed to being, we have become so accustomed to being interrupted that we now interrupt ourselves.
Yeah.
And this was a completely new thought for me. Okay. And as we learn to deal with this technology, we have to begin thinking about it differently. And one of the points she makes is that we now interrupt ourselves. What she found was that people go to email more than they go to social media to interrupt themselves. Okay.
Right.
They check their email 77 times a day. One person checked his hundreds of times a day. Okay. And 41% were doing it on their own accord. They weren't doing it because they were getting pings or they were getting notifications. They just stopped what they were doing and they went to check email. Right. Nobody told them, nobody prompted them. They weren't getting any notifications. So even if your notifications are off, you can't escape these internal triggers that are now moving you. Remember, you have a 47-second attention span.
Right.
Okay, that's what's happened. We have this very short attention span, and about every 47 seconds, something inside you says, go someplace else.
Right.
Check and see, check and see what else is going on about every minute.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what we're battling.
Yeah. And so a lot of that comes from internal sources. It's not somebody doing that to us. It's not something happening to us from the external world. That's internal to us.
It's what our brains do.
Right. And so when parents say, well, if he just turns his phone off, or if she would just turn off her notifications or this, then she would stay focused. Well, maybe or maybe not. There's still the internal world that distracts us. But, you mentioned points 3 and 4. 3 was very interesting, but 4 is also very interesting because
4 is the most fascinating.
Yeah. But, again, we have this 47-second attention span, but we maintain it by interrupting ourselves. But she argues that this could be an adaptive mechanism.
Right.
And so much of what we do may not be very conducive to flow, because we've talked many times before on the podcast about the importance of flow and how good that is. But she's saying that maybe not. Right.
I found this to be the most fascinating part of this, that if you follow her logic, she says, first of all, we have a diminished attention span. It's very, very short. Berney, you remember, we used to teach this. We said that attention span is correlated to chronological age.
Right.
So that a 5-year-old has about a 5-minute attention span, and an 8-year-old has about an 8-minute attention span. It doesn't go beyond 10 minutes. A 10-year-old has a 10, but a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old and a 20-year-old all have about a 10-minute attention span. Right. And there were many studies done that taught us that students tend to pay attention for the first few minutes of a college class, for the first 4 or 5 minutes, and they sort of drift and daydream, and they come back and tune in at the end of the class to get their assignment. Okay. And we've been teaching that for years. All right. I think what the difference here, what this person is saying is that it's not a 10-minute attention span anymore. It's probably closer to a 1 or 2 minute attention span, regardless of your age. And you're constantly distracting yourself. You're constantly interrupting yourself. And one of the reasons she believes that we do that is because very intense work, regardless of what type of work you're doing, is exhausting. Okay. So she says, if you're doing a serious writing assignment, how long can you maintain that high level of cognitive focus, that cognitive attention? How long can you maintain it? I probably just for a couple of minutes. And then you sort of you sort of give yourself a break, okay, and then you come back to it, okay, because she says that mindless diversions, such as going on the internet or playing a game. She mentions Candy Crush or some other mindless thing, playing solitaire or something. Even scrolling through social media is the kind of time wasting or time wasting activity that actually serves a valuable function. We think of it as a waste of time, but actually it's our way of giving our brain a break so that we can go back and work at this very high, very intense level.
Right.
And she said, it's no more possible to maintain that intense focus than it is for 12 or 15 or 18 minutes than it is to do anything else for 12 or 15 or 18 minutes. You wouldn't, she said, the example she used is you wouldn't lift weights without taking break. You take breaks. You do a set and you take a break, and you do a set and you take a break. And she said, we do the same thing cognitively. You work intensely and you take a break, and you work intensely and you take a break. And yet we expect ourselves to be able to sit and focus for long periods. And we certainly expect students to sit and focus for long periods. And it's probably an unrealistic expectation given where we are with this technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we look at these different points, I think some things that we need to pull from this and where we need to go with it is that, you know, we have technology, and, you know, as we were prepping for the podcast, you said we can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
We need to stop talking about getting rid of technology, getting rid of the social media, that's not going to happen.
Right.
You know, barring some apocalypse or something, technology isn't going anywhere. It would have to be the infrastructure is going to happen. Mm-hmm. But let's think about it in an intelligent way, and think about how to use it to our benefit. Mm-hmm. Because I think, as she wrote in that last point, you know, it's what we're driven to do. We are driven to explore different things and look for those rabbit holes. But it's also just part of what's important for us. Sometimes we need that little bit of a distraction. Sometimes we need that little bit of a reset to get back on track. And so we take a minute, we do some. Now we have to be disciplined about that. You can't go off and play Candy Crush for 2 hours and then we have to be a little bit disciplined by it. But let's use it to our benefit.
Right. And we have this technology. We have a shortened attention span. We need to take more frequent breaks. And so what you have to do is you have to schedule yourself differently than you did before. When the world moves slowly, you know, 2 generations ago in the 50s or the 60s, kids would go to school and there would be this very structured, methodical way of doing things. That world is over. That world is gone. It no longer exists, okay? So what you have to do now, if you're an adult and you have control of your schedule, you have to obey what she calls your chronotype. If you work best in the morning, then that becomes your productive time. If you work best at night, that becomes your productive time. I don't get much done in the late afternoon. It's just not a productive, and I can't work at night. I've never been able to do much work at night. So I do all my work early in the morning because that's my most productive time. And I don't try to force myself to do things other times of the day. I also have had to learn how to schedule my downtime. You need to take breaks. There's no activity that you should do over and over and over and over and over for long periods of time. Even manual laborers take breaks during the day, okay? You also have to maintain your right to disconnect.
I think it's really important.
I think I think every once in a while, you got to give yourself a break. Just turn everything off, whether it's at night or on a weekend, I mean, there are many times when I put my phone in another room and I turn it off. And I just don't use it because I don't want to be reacting. I want to settle down. I want to relax. And I don't want to be reacting. And I don't feel the need to react. People who know me know that I may not answer my phone. They don't expect me to answer it because they know I'm going to have downtime.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, we are all busier than we've ever been.
Mhm.
But we still have to find that time to disconnect and
Right.
just have some of that downtime, and really just pay attention to our own attention.
Mhm.
Pay attention to and be aware of when your attention is at its peak and when you're fading, and react and adjust accordingly. If
Right.
your attention is starting to fade, take a little bit of a break, do something else, and then come back to what it is that you need to do. But you have to be cognizant of that and make those decisions.
Right. Yeah, but please know that yes, technology has shortened our attention span, but we also shorten it ourselves, and we are taking more frequent breaks, and all of that is okay. Now, with adults, because you have control of your life, you can manage this yourself. There are people who work better at night than during the day. So you have to know what your best time of day is. You have to know when you need breaks. You have to take breaks. With children, it's a little more difficult.
Right.
And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be preparing some information on how to manage children's use, because remember, they're just learning. We're all just learning how to do this. But as we learn, we have to teach our children and our students how to manage their time. They need to develop an awareness of the kind of stuff that Mark is talking about in her book, and they have to learn how to manage the technology. They are not going to get rid of their cell phones. Right. It's not going, but they can learn how to manage them. They're not going to get rid of YouTube and TikTok. We have to help them learn how to manage it. We wouldn't want our kids to be lifting weights 5 hours a day. Okay. So we don't want them doing anything 5 hours a day.
Right.
It's not sustainable.
Absolutely.
So we have to teach them how to use it and use the technology to their advantage.
Absolutely. So as we said, there's some links in the show notes to some of the articles that we pulled from today. We encourage you to check those out and come back and, as we talk about some of these issues as they relate to kids and what to do about it. All right.
Yep.
Well, that is it for today. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.